Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to I Am the Cavalry in the beautiful Copa Lounge. Today is Wednesday. It's the last day of BsidesLV and the last day of 2026 I Am the Cavalry track. We're very delighted that you're able to join us today. Fabulous. Just a couple of things. One is code of conduct regarding taking pictures. Please make sure you have consent from whoever you're going to take a picture of. Avoid those wide shots. Now, our featured speaker coming up next has given her consent to have her picture taken, so feel free to do that. Do know that this session is being photographed professionally, videotaped, so don't feel like you've got to write down or take pictures of every slide. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. You can pay attention and be in the moment. Okay, coming up next is the esteemed Ms. Sarah Miller, who is a professional. She's a professional in this space, and we're just delighted to have her join us today. So put your hands together for Sarah.
Thanks, David. I think I got this spot. I think Josh said she talks all the time anyway, so we're just going to give her a slot. Yeah, which is fair. So good morning. I am, in fact, Sarah Miller. Just so you know, at the end will be my contact information. I'm happy to send these, because I got a bunch of resources in here. I will send this to anybody who asks. Don't feel like you have to take a picture of every slide. I'm happy to send them to you at any point. So this is who I am. I'm Dr. Sarah Miller now. I wasn't when I first started hanging out in here, but now I am. Yeah, that was a long time coming. So I'm a career emergency manager. So I manage disasters. I plan for, prepare for, mitigate against, recover from disasters of all kinds. And in the emergency management field, we don't really care why the disaster happened. We do consequence management, and we help the people and the systems recover afterwards. So it doesn't actually matter if it was a hurricane or a cyber incident or all of the above happening at once. It doesn't matter to us in the big scheme of things, because we don't worry about that so much, right? If the power is out, it doesn't matter to us why the power is out. We still have all of these things that we have to worry about. So I'm also a lifelong technologist. This is my husband's sitting over there, but this is the 30th anniversary of our first trip to DEF CON, which was our very first trip we ever took together. I know. So I am among the old now. So my full-time job, I'm an associate professor of emergency management at a college in Washington State. I did my PhD, and I researched the use of AI in emergency management. I spend most of my time talking to emergency managers about technology because they do not understand it, by and large. I rarely get to talk to technologists about emergency management. So this is a big switch that I'm very much excited. So that's me at the top. That's at a wildland fire, the Okanagan Complex fire. Somehow I was the finance section chief for that. Yeah, it's not my favorite job, but it was a job I could do. And the other one, that was me at the UN last year, talking about AI. I know, wild. Not a thing I would have ever imagined doing. So let's set the stage. You're all here because you care about something related to this, I hope. So when we talk about resilience in the emergency management space, we're talking about preparedness. And you're here in the I Am the Cavalry track because we've spent 13 years talking about how unprepared and unresilient all of the things are. How many of you have a disaster kit? That's a higher than average number, but it's still less than half. How many of you are certain that your children or grandchildren's schools have plans for them in a disaster? Okay, four. Four of you. And you already know the issue, right? You already know this is an issue or you wouldn't be here. How about your workplace? Your workplace is good to go. You do the fire drill. You know where you're supposed to meet. You know where your floor wardens are. How many of you are a floor warden in your building because you work in a, nope, nobody. Nobody. And if you're all remote, then you're all a floor warden, right? If you're remote, you can raise your hand for floor warden because it's your house, right? Yeah. How about your neighbors? Do you know your neighbors? Yeah, okay. That's also a higher than, but because it's all of you together. But this is the crux of the program, of the problem, right? We know that we should do these things, and we have not yet done them. or we haven't thought about them in the right way. Maybe you're more prepared than you think. I'm going to do a little bit of myth busting, because sitting here this week, I heard some myths that I'm just going to squish. People panic after disasters. People do not panic after disasters. The news says there was no panic. And my answer to the news is always like, well, no shit, there was no panic. People don't panic after disasters. But it is perpetual myth. People take the action that they think is going to bring them the best outcome. That may be running, it may be hiding, it may be doing things that don't necessarily make sense to a person not in their shoes, but they usually are acting with purpose, and panic indicates acting with no purpose whatsoever, right? So dispel that myth from your head. People don't panic. They are doing the best they can with the information they have. If you give them more information, they will do different things usually. Looting is common. I heard somebody say looting in here. Looting is highly uncommon. A community continues to do the things that a community did before the disaster happened. So if burglaring was happening before, it's going to continue happening after, and it may be mistaken for looting. Like, it's just bad guys being bad guys. We had, unfortunately, the night before we flew here, so I'm from Washington State, 650 homes in Spokane burned down Saturday night, just gone. They had more than 30 reports of looting. All of them were false. There was no looting. The sheriff's office investigated every single one. And so it's just important to understand that. And then there's this one. This is a self-perpetuated myth that I'm a child of the 80s, right? I'm from the government. We're here to help. You know, hide under your desks. It's all going to be fine. We're going to help you. That was always a lie. We always knew it was a lie. But there's a belief that was perpetuated by all levels of government that somebody's coming to help you. Right? So you don't really need to be all that prepared because somebody's coming. Well, sorta, kinda, maybe, probably not. Because of size and scale and scope, right? If it's a local community, sure, people are gonna rally together, but if it's a widespread event, everybody's busy. There's nobody to come, right? And if we have a wide-scale event that takes out power and airports and things, nobody's coming because people come from far away. And they can't get there. So what we have is what we have. So this is sort of the state of disaster response. Disasters have always been political. In the fact that if you had a big disaster in your state, your governor had to write a letter to the president, and the president had to say, yeah, cool, we're gonna give you money. This has become not the way anymore. And it is not my intention to make this about politics, but it's important to understand that disaster declarations at the federal level are now guided by how a state voted. We saw that in Oregon even last week when they had fires everywhere and were denied fire assistance. We've seen it in my state, and it's a really important piece to understand because it changes the equation of what your local community has been able to count on for help after a disaster. Disasters are, in fact, becoming more frequent and far more costly than they ever have been. We're talking billions of dollars a year now. And that's non-cyber things. Those are natural disasters. You add a cyber component to that, and now you've got economic loss or loss of life in a hospital that nobody's talking about, right? It's hard to quantify those because companies don't really want to tell you how much money they lost. Hospitals don't really want to confirm how many lives were lost. And local communities cannot count on the national assistance that they have historically been able to. Part of this, too, is a gutting of the federal workforce. We had a sidebar over here this morning. There was a GAO report yesterday or the day before that essentially said, yeah, the gutting of FEMA means FEMA's not actually able to do the response mission that they once had. And so that is just, that all trickles down to wherever you live or work. No matter where you are, those mechanisms for help are very diminished compared to what they were 5 years ago. They're just a lot less, but your communities don't have more resources to deal with those. Your local city's budget did not go up as a result of the loss of federal help. Probably in your community, your city's budget hasn't really gone up at all, but the price of everything has gone way up, so in effect, they have a budget loss, right? So thinking about all of these, when you think about, okay, now let's talk about what happens if we lose our water systems, right? Now we have all of these compounding failures, and we still only have what we have locally. So emergency managers like to kvetch a lot about how people are unprepared, right? I did my little poll. Most of you didn't raise your hands for things. They'd be like, see, you're not prepared. But you probably are better prepared than you think you are. There tends to be this notion that we gauge preparedness by output. Do you have a kit? Well, no. Well, then you're not prepared. Having a kit does not make you prepared, right? You can go to Costco, you can buy the giant kit, you can stick it in your car. Does that make you prepared? No, it just means you have a giant kit of crap in your car, right? Sometimes it's really handy, right? That roll of toilet paper when you're driving down the middle of nowhere, you're like, I'm really glad that's there. But it does not make you prepared for something big. Preparedness is about activity. It's about the doing things. And so people are often far more resilient than the system gives them credit for being. If you look even casually at most disasters, what you will see is people in the community stepping up to help other people in the community in ways that are appropriate. You will also see people randomly starting GoFundMes and raising funds and donations that are not needed and are not appropriate. But when you look at the community itself, the community is taking steps to help themselves and their neighbors, right? I've been watching the Spokane fire a lot. I've got family who have the car ready to go. They're ready to evacuate. All I got to do is throw the cats and the guns in, and they're out. And so these things are not abstract. They are very, very real. But you look at what's happening in those communities, people opening their homes for each other, people going out and looking for lost pets and rounding up loose cattle and horses and reuniting them. People are resilient. We can give them tools, though, that help them be more resilient and help them understand that they already have a level of resilience. So if we want to move the needle forward on preparedness and resilience, and in my mind, I use them interchangeably when it comes to people. A lot of time, these are the things that do not work, scare tactics. You will still see in communities, and you will hear people say, okay, if you're not going to evacuate, please write your social security number on your forehead. Anybody ever heard that before? Yep. It is one of the dumbest things you can possibly say. Because the community's like, well, they're full of shit. Like, I'm not doing that. They're just trying to scare me. Yep, that's exactly what they're going to do. And people have the absolute opposite reaction to that because they know it's dumb, right? Appealing to people's sense of self-preservation in the abstract also doesn't work. There might be an incident someday where we lose water. You're all like, yep, you should get prepared for that. But then we ourselves don't internalize that. This is a well-researched frame. We don't internalize it. When people see a thing happening in another place, or when they can see the thing like a hurricane is coming, they're much more likely to take preparedness actions. Telling people to do things that they cannot do also doesn't move the needle forward, right? 72-hour kit or 2 weeks prepared. A lot of states have gone to 2 weeks. I'm in an earthquake country. We're like, you got to be ready for 2 weeks. If I say to a family who is low income or a fixed income, and I say, okay, you got to stockpile 2 weeks of food, and they're like, I don't know what we're eating tomorrow. I cannot do this thing that you told me I must do in order to survive. And so what we have in essence told them is they are not going to survive, right? And so framing this differently is really important in helping people understand what they can do. And our other issue that we have in the emergency management world is our message is constantly changing, right? How many of you have heard 72 hours prepared? Yeah, that's what FEMA says. Got a 72-hour kit. How many of you have heard, oh, you got to be prepared for a week? Yeah, and you all just heard me say 2 weeks, right? And people are like, I'm confused. How long do I need to be prepared for? Please give me a number, right? We can't because everyone's circumstances are different, but we don't put that into the equation. That 72 hours, in case you're wondering, is generally because that's how long it takes national resources to get to where you are. So if we have a big disaster and we need the Red Cross to come, it takes them 3 days to get there. If we have a big disaster and you need an urban search and rescue team, it takes them 3 days to get there, just because of all of the logistics of it. But it's not actually about preparedness. It's about motivating people to do something. Public health does this very well. They don't do constantly changing messages, right? How many of you have seatbelts in your car? Yeah, and your car bitches at you incessantly if you don't buckle it. Yeah, right? We didn't have that 30 years ago. We didn't have seatbelts. Public health has just been yammering, please have seatbelts, here's the data, please have seatbelts, here's the data. We don't, okay, I always use the we don't smoke in buildings part anymore, but then we're in Vegas and it smells like an ashtray, right? Every place else, they don't smoke in buildings because public health took that message and carried it for decades and won that battle, right? Emergency management struggles with that because we don't have that body of good knowledge. Doesn't mean we can't, it just means we don't. And our situation changes depending on where we live. What does work is marketing practices, right? Building standard marketing into our messaging plan. Marketing works, and it works for a reason. It's scientifically based. It's based on psychology, right? We know we can get people to buy a widget from Temu if we advertise it to the right person at the right time. The same thing works for preparedness messaging. But it's also a multi-channel thing. So people do this thing called milling when they hear a message that they maybe don't quite believe or they're not sure. They do a thing called milling, and they look for 3 sources of validation for that. And if they find one that disagrees, that stops the process. They got to find 3 more pieces of validation. But when we do this kind of messaging, we also want to make sure that we're putting it in all of the places that people are likely to look or seek confirmation. That means community leaders, they're faith-based leaders, they're school teachers. Everybody's got to be on the same page so that when someone asks and seeks this information, the people in their orbit are all on the same page. We have to meet people where they are, meaning if they're on a fixed income, if they have an access need, right? They use a mobility device. We have to give them the tools to be prepared in a way that makes sense for them. We can't just tell people, well, get in your car and drive. Well, maybe I don't have a car, right? Like maybe that's not an option. So how do we help people through this? And I'm going to give you answers to these. Like these are not rhetorical questions. We're going to get to the answer part here in a second. We can also appeal to people's sense of community, right? And asking people, hey, do you have a plan for your pets? People will plan all day for their pets. If they've got a dog or a cat or I have a friend who's got, apparently now raises bearded dragons. They have plans for how they're going to take care of those things, and they will leave themselves out. They're like, oh yeah, I got a whole plan for how we're going to get the dogs and the cats and the kids. I'm like, well, what about you? Oh, well, I didn't really think about that, right? But people will take care of the people in their orbit when they feel an obligation to. People need to build social capital. The number of you who raised your hands and said you know your neighbors, you're already several steps ahead of a whole lot of other people who don't know their neighbors, right? Knowing your neighbors is resilience. Knowing that you can go over and ask them for help, or knowing who not to ask, right? Like, equally important. We have that person in my neighborhood, and they're not invited to anything. No one likes them. Like, we're not going to let them die, but we're also not going to go out of our way probably to help them out, right? Every neighborhood has that person, I'm sure. But the rest of us, like, we're out there helping each other out, and we're cleaning up and helping, just helping, right? That is social capital, and that is actually part of disaster resilience. Giving people actions they can take that seem reasonable to them and achievable to them, right? I'm just going to point at you because you're right there. If I'm like, and I don't know, maybe I'm just going to make up a story about her right here. She's a college student. She lives in a dorm, and I'm like, you got to be prepared for 2 weeks. Can you lay in 2 weeks of water and food in your dorm room? She said no, right? I gave her an unachievable task, but I'm like, hey, can you throw a box of granola bars in a bag and an extra pair of shoes under your bed? She's like, yes, I can do that. That helps me make me more prepared because I got food, I got shoes in an emergency. I can do that thing. So tailoring messages is important because we need to make sure that we get to that audience. So I've got some campaign examples. These are the takeaways because all of these are things that you can just yank and do in your neighborhood, in your community. You can offer to do them for your churches, your schools, your whatevers. You can help your local government do them. I don't know, have any of you ever talked to the local emergency manager in your community where you live? Is there more than one person in that office? No.
Full time? No.
Yeah, exactly. There's probably Unless you're in a big city, there's 1, 2. I had a whole 2.5 people and a boat ton of volunteers who would go do these things. Your local emergency management is for sure understaffed, under-resourced. They probably don't even have a training budget. So even if they wanted to go learn a thing, they probably don't have a budget for it, right? And that's not getting any better. So all of these campaign examples, they build on a sense of responsibility, an appropriate sense of responsibility. Not, you're going to go save the world. You're going to save yourself and the person sitting next to you, right? That's all we're asking. Keeping it manageable. And building that social capital, meeting your neighbors, planning with your friends. People are good at planning parties and things. It's the same skill set as planning for a disaster. Deploying actionable activities, giving people something to do that isn't just, here, read a pamphlet. I guarantee your emergency management office has a pamphlet that you didn't read, and neither did anybody else, unless it was the one with pets. Rely on community action, right? Communities will organize themselves to help, and we need to capitalize on that. And we have to base them on the risks and hazards that people can relate to. People can't relate to, oh my God, a cyber attack and no one anywhere has any water. That is unrelatable to people. They can relate to, hey, remember that time we had this storm and the power was out for 4 days? They can relate to that. But preparing for one event helps prepare them for another, because resilience is resilience across the board. So this is a program called Map Your Neighborhood. It was developed in Washington State. Again, you can capture these or I can send them to you. It's a little flyer, and you sit down with your neighbors and you literally make a map of your neighborhood. Who lives where, who's willing to participate, who has what skills, who has what supplies, who's gonna have what roles in a disaster. This site has materials for high-rise buildings, because you got neighbors there, and it's got resources for communities. There's facilitation videos. You don't even have to talk to your neighbors. You just got to invite them over and click play on YouTube. I would suggest talking to your neighbors, because that's important. Be 2 weeks ready. This is a current campaign that Oregon uses that has worked particularly well in rural areas. So they are encouraging people to go take actions with their community, and preparedness for them is less about gathering stuff than it is about doing actions and having plans. And I say that as Oregon is right now in the middle of the worst fires that they have maybe ever had. It is tragic is what it is. Who depends on you? This is a campaign. There's actually a lot of research that was done on this campaign. And what they found is that it didn't necessarily move the needle forward on actual, like what they were considering preparedness. What it did was build social capital. It raised awareness. It got people talking to each other. And this was one that I did, preparedness on a budget, because in my city, we kept going to the same lovely gated communities. They wanted us to come talk about preparedness because it made them feel good to have us come talk about preparedness. And I'm like, I'm tired of, you're lovely, your food is great. I need to talk to the people who aren't living in your lovely gated community. So we redid our presentation to be on a budget. There's a template. And the first time we did it, we filled our city council chambers because people went, oh, I live on a budget. This is for me. We had busfuls of little ladies showing up. It was amazing because we talked them through the process of what they already had and what they already knew how to do. And we focused on them sharing information with their neighbors in the room, right? People talked about what they did. And people are much more likely, like if someone in this room was like, oh, I did this, other people like, oh, that guy's like me. I can do that. People are much more likely to listen to people that they consider their peers. So we talked about skills a little bit earlier this week. Josh had this idea, everybody go be a paramedic. That's really hard, particularly where you live. First aid. So yes, so first aid is on here, but wilderness first aid. That's an achievable thing for most people, and it gives you a skill set that is particularly useful in disasters because it's designed for people who hurt themselves in the backcountry, and we use it in urban areas as well. CERT or NET, so community emergency response teams, neighborhood emergency teams, a lot of places have organized programs where people can come together and volunteer to help their community. They can learn these skills even without an organized program. These programs can be really expensive for communities to run, but the skills are still valuable, and people learn how to do basic things, right? How to use a fire extinguisher correctly, how to rescue someone in a way that doesn't hurt others. We know that historically in disasters, 80% or more of the people who are rescued by bystanders, which also means that that same number of people who need help in your community after disaster, whether it's a cyber event or not, they're going to be helped by other people, not by the government or nonprofit organization. People aren't inherently going to help the people around them. Not everyone, right? Not everyone is a helper, but there are always helpers. And giving helpers more tools to be more helpful is the thing to do, right? Scouting. Any of you former Girl or Boy Scouts? Yeah, you learned everything you needed to know about preparedness in scouting. Just go review, like tying knots and archery. That could be useful, right? If we get there. And the big thing that we know from years and years of disaster research is we have to be ready to offer this kind of stuff just in time. So when people they're like, oh my gosh, a bad thing is happening, I don't know what to do. We have to have resources available for them to look in the now for how to do the thing they need to do. They know they need to do it. We just have to prepare that material in advance because they don't care right this instant. They care when they think something is going to happen. I'm excluding the preppers from this conversation because the preppers are prepared for the world to end right now, every minute, every day. They're in the bunker with the guns and the food and whatever they got, right? They may or may not actually help others in a disaster, but at least they're self-sufficient, right? And I'm good with that. All right, I'll take questions. This is my contact information. Feel free to take a picture of that, and I will send it. I saw a hand. David's taking the microphone.
I'm putting the microphone right here. And so if you have a question, hurry quick like a bunny over here to ask your question, your quick question.
Yep. We have 4 minutes.
We've got 4 minutes. So we've got time for
and I will be here after,
questions.
There's somebody right behind you, David.
Not so much a question as an addendum. As a 20-year wilderness EMT certified, I will say that's a huge step. Because it's not available for everyone everywhere. It's expensive, and the things that we see that screw people is not knowing local flora and fauna, which you can do with your master gardeners. Know poison ivy. Know what's edible and not edible. Know what natives are in your area.
Yeah.
And itches and infections are the thing that take you out. So if you can't find wilderness EMT or first aid, start with master gardeners and learn the things that are dangerous to you in your area.
Master gardeners is an amazing, extension offices and master gardeners are amazing organizations. Yep, absolutely. Go ahead. Hurry.
So I live in Western North Carolina and went through Helene, so thank you for what you do.
Yeah.
Because we got screwed.
Yeah.
Or we got hit hard.
Yep.
So the one thing that I learned that I've never thought of is communication. We lost all non-radio communication for up to at least 3-4 days. Our local people did not have radios. Fire department didn't have radios for some reason. That's not in the skills like radio or like.
It is.
I'm a big supporter of Meshtastic because at least that's something. My entire neighborhood is decked out, but I guess recommendation on emergency communication.
Yeah, so I intentionally left that out because I sort of assumed that there were presentations that talked about radios and stuff in this space. I would say this, ham radio is the beacon, but you got to study and you got to pay for the test, and you can do it at DEF CON and BSides every year. But also just people having the little portable walkie-talkies so they can talk in their neighborhood. If you look at those Map Your Neighborhood materials, that's one of the things it talks about is get some radios for your neighborhood so you can talk to each other. The hams are out there and the amateur radio operators, and they have those connections. They're just waiting for somebody to ask them to do a thing. Like if a disaster happened, I guarantee that some local ham stood up the local repeater network in emergency mode and was like, let's go. And nobody asked them to do anything. Some parts of the country, but hurricane country is better about it. But yes, radios absolutely have a way to communicate with your people, whoever those people are. Absolutely. All right. I'm going to cede to Mark now.
Put your hands together. Thank
at the end in the final track wrap up. So if you have some, keep them ready. All right, I'm really pleased to. Many of you probably don't know retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. I value and appreciate Mark is a strong cup of coffee, to quote one of my Aussie friends. What I love about Mark's, I mean, he can tell you his background and history, but Mark does not mince words. He's a New Englander, candid, direct, blunt person. Wickedly smart, and if you're familiar with the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, Mark was involved in the first round and is responsible for running this new infestation. I asked Mark to give us some hard truth about Taiwan conflict, the most likely, the most dangerous, and to the degree to which he looks familiar, you're seeing him on the news all the time about the Straits of Hormuz as well. So given that we just had a lot, over 100 now and counting, being reported publicly of water hacks likely done by Iranian hackers last week through this week, he was not prepared to talk about that, but perhaps he's willing to talk about that. So he's probably going to leave 20 minutes for intense Q&A from any skepticism you might have on this. But I've been floating, if you saw my track opener, the Cavalry and the undisruptible27.org project believes the most likely timing for Volt Typhoon to trigger some sort of effect on U.S. soil is probably spring of 2028. I have very different reasons for coming to that conclusion than Mark does, but Mark's going to share his assessment for the most likely, most dangerous, maybe have room for some take on what's going on with Iran. And we want you to bring any nagging suspicion or doubt you have to see if he can respond to it. So with that, Mark, please introduce yourself. Let's all give a round of applause to Mark.
All right. You guys hear me okay? All right. Jeez. All right. Sorry about that. Can you hear me okay now? I don't think this is working. Well, I'll use the handheld. All right. That's fine. Okay. Sorry I sat down. I just got back. I spent 3 weeks in Ukraine training their military up till last weekend, and have been flying around since then doing things. I don't train their military on cyber. I train them on how to use American weaponry properly and do a few other things. And happy to talk about that as well, but that's really not what we're here. We're here about, look, when I think about cyber threats, I ran the Cyberspace Solarium Commission and I run a cyber center now. The reality is the day-to-day is criminal behavior, whether it's ransomware or other tools, that's what you worry about. But I recognize there's a separate national security issue, and you're seeing a little bit of it play out now with non-ransomware attacks on 100 water utilities by a foreign adversary, and the president is full of shit. It's, of course, Iran. And, to say it's Mike Waltz or Tim Waltz is ridiculous. It's almost embarrassing because it's disinformation and it plays down the impact of a foreign threat, and the president does us all a disservice when he does that. I should say, in between, I did 35 years in the military, 36 years, retired as a Rear Admiral. I commanded a carrier strike group, ran our operations in the Pacific for all the different services, ran our plans in Europe for all our different services at a combatant command, and commanded ships and groups of ships and all that kind of stuff. I retired directly to go work for Senator John McCain for 2 years, but he got sick right after I joined him and he eventually passed away. He understood this, believe it or not, for a dude that couldn't turn a computer on, not least because he couldn't move his elbows, but he understood cyber. He said, we have no strategic approach to defending our critical infrastructure in cyberspace. That was his one thought. It was the perfect thought. We had no strategic approach to defending ourselves. So a senator named Ben Sass, who's been in the news recently because after leaving the Senate, he's since gotten stage 4 pancreatic cancer and is very publicly dying. He came to McCain and said, let's do a commission on this. I'll just say real quickly, 99% of federal commissions are bullshit and they don't get anything done because it's a group of smart people telling congressmen how to do something the congressmen think they already know how to do, even though the congressmen are not a group of smart people, but they think they know what they need to do. What was weird in 2020, when we produced our report, we did it in 1 year really quickly. What was weird was Congress didn't know how to deal with cybersecurity, and they actually were willing to acknowledge it, which is why cybersecurity has been a reasonably nonpartisan issue. That's breaking apart in the current system, which breaks apart anything that's nonpartisan right now. But we were able to get a lot of stuff done for 3 or 4 years. But what worries me now is that the coming to the front of the nation state. Look, here's what's going on. Two of our adversaries, Russia and China, and I'll call, I mean, I know the president and I disagree on this, that whether or not those two countries are adversaries. In both cases, I'm not sure he does. Both of them are practicing an aggressive form of hybrid warfare. Russia's is called new generation or next generation warfare. They mix cyber attacks with actual physical. They know shit, go into other countries and blow up infrastructure, you know, with like packs of explosives. They shoot drones across the border. They do jamming of PNT, position navigation and timing. They do influence operations. They do something called weaponized migration, where they sneak across a group of like 20,000 immigrants at the time of an election in a district, so that the far right, you know, everyone goes, holy shit, that's a bad immigration policy, and the far right wins elections. So they're doing all that stuff all the time to about 10 or 12 countries in Europe. The Chinese practice was called cyber-enabled economic warfare, and they generally concentrate on one country right now, Taiwan, and that's they mix like diplomatic tools, economic tools, legal warfare, with cyber attacks and influence operations, and military feints to kind of pressurize Taiwan to break their societal resilience. So the think tank I joined after I ran the Solarium Commission. I had to find a think tank that took no foreign money and no corporate money. I'll tell you, that took the think tanks in D.C. from 300 to 3 really quickly, which should worry you. When someone puts a report, like a friend of mine runs a missile defense think tank, except I know all his money comes from Raytheon, Lockheed, and Northrop Grumman. So when he puts out a report on a weapon system, he's a friend. I've known him for 25 years. We fought together. I don't trust a word he fucking says, because if he were to say this weapon system sucks from one of those three companies who build all the weapon systems, he would stop getting their money. So, you know, take everything you hear from think tanks, not obviously U27, they're a genius 501c3, and I'm here because I believe in what Josh does. You know, our think tank says to me, go train Ukrainians, go train Taiwan. In Ukraine, it's kind of military shit, like I said, how to use weapons. It's up with their corps commanders and stuff. In Taiwan, it's different. I realized after 15 years of being on the point, I commanded the Carrier Strike Group out of Japan. I commanded the ship squadrons, the 7th Fleet units out of Japan. I was head of operations Pacific Command. I spent like 10 or 12 years just thinking about how to defeat a Chinese cross-strait invasion. I realized China was thinking about more than that. They recognize that's really hard. So they're also planning this cyber-enabled economic warfare. And this is where I know we agree on the date, disagree on the reason. I think that our most vulnerable time that the United States has is in January of 2028, there's going to be an election in Taiwan. And it's going to be the party that President Xi and the Chinese hate, called the DPP, Democratic People's Party, is probably going to win its 4th straight election, which means 4 more years of this anti-Chinese, pro-democracy party, you know, 13, 14, 15, 16 years. And Xi's going to say, F it. I'm done with like having the rheostat of pressure on like 4. Take the rheostat to 8. And he's going to crank up the pressure. What's that pressure? It's cyber attacks, influence operations, legal attacks, diplomatic attacks, economic attacks. And that's going to super pressurize that, and I think potentially lead to a crisis with the United States, which leads into all of you, right? So, but just so you know, that is going to happen. I really believe that that's how I see the electoral landscape, and I spend, you know, a little less. I probably only spend about 8 or 10 weeks a year in Taiwan, a little less in Ukraine. But I spend enough time there to have a pretty good idea what's going to happen. So that's why it matters. And look, China knows this, and China knows there's only one country that supports Taiwan. I mean, Taiwan's is this unbelievable country, by the way, 23 million people, 8 to 10% GDP growth for 15 straight years, and no end in sight to it ending. Why? They're our 4th largest trading partner, 23 million people, and they trade with us more than Germany or Japan. It's Canada, China, Mexico, Taiwan. And Taiwan has the worst, I guess, from a import-export, from a Trumpy, tariffy point of view, the worst trade imbalance. They give us $200 billion, and we give them $50 billion. Trump hates this. I call it a big, beautiful imbalance because, to use his lexicon, that $200 billion, $170 billion was called compute. That's semiconductor manufacturing, microelectronics. That $170 billion directly drives, not in some bullshit Davos way, but in an actually measurable economic way, $4 to $5 trillion of U.S. GDP. Our GDP's, up there in the high, mid to high mid 30s right now, so that's like they drive 12-14% of our GDP. They're semiconductors. We don't build fridges. We don't build trucks. We don't build phones. We don't build weapon systems. We don't build F-35s. We don't build all that stuff. There is no replacement for them in electronics. They're 75% of the legacy stuff, 95% of the high-end stuff. So just to put it in perspective, Taiwan is massively important to us. And when the president says shit on the Air Force One, like, well, it's 9,900 miles away, who cares? I mean, wrong answer, man. They really matter. And when he denies them weapons sales, because we're the only country that'll sell them weapons. China runs a massive campaign against them. All right. So that's the context. Taiwan really matters. China really wants it. It is their number one goal of their state. It is the number one goal of President Xi. He wants to do it while he's still alive. He's 70 years old, and he smoked 3 packs a day for 35 years. So he is on a time. Although the craziest thing you'll ever see was him and Vladimir Putin walking with Kim Jong-un, like at the 70th anniversary or 80th anniversary of World War II, and there's a hot mic. And the two of them start talking about the efficacy of and the likelihood of organ transplants keeping you alive to the age of 150. And you have to know that both these guys run countries that practice forced organ harvesting from minority citizens. So when they talk like this, you're like, holy shit, these two guys are harvesting organs. And by the way, Putin had his daughter switch her profession in medical, her specialty in medical, to be how do you use organs to extend life? And I mean, holy shit. So these two could live a while, but Xi wants it done on his watch. 2028's coming. When that happens, what's going to happen in our country? How's our cybersecurity? And I think we all know this. We are vulnerable. We're vulnerable. We've made conscious decisions to not invest in cybersecurity for decades. Take water, for example. Water, when I was a kid, water systems ran like a local county water thing would have 10 to 15 people. Because they had the guys, when they had to have a shift in something, 4 guys went out to operate valves, 2 guys started pumps, 1 guy was mechanically doing the chemical addition all the time. All that shit got automated. And they saved all this money in your county. 0% of that money went to the cybersecurity of the new IT and OT systems that replaced the humans. And that's gone. That capital is long gone, spent on other things. Our water is run about 88% by government, state and local institutions. County, locality, township, even smaller. What I just described is a group of people who don't have 2 wood nickels to rub together, right? No resources. They can't raise cash like the normal way a company raises cash to make an investment. So would be some kind of capital call. They have to raise cash through bonds, 2 and 3 year referendums that no one votes for, by the way. Your choice is to vote for better schools, better parks, better libraries, better water, cybersecurity. You know where they're going on that. I can't even get my wife to vote for it, when we have it in Arlington, so much less. So we're vulnerable. And look, our adversary's getting skilled. The Chinese are now up at 60,000 on-net operators. That means 60,000 men and women spending their day figuring out how to get it, principally the United States, but also our allies and partners. We have about 12,000 between about half military, half intelligence community. They have about 60,000. Now, 60,000 it is better than 12,000 as a number, but our 12,000 may be pretty good. Theirs have a quantity, and now the tools are easier and easier to get, and machine learning and AI are only helping this. 60,000 is going to mean something. And they know we're vulnerable. And most importantly, China shifted. China spent the last 30 years on intellectual property theft, on espionage, and they have shifted to what's called operational preparation of the battlefield. That's when they go into your system and they place either malware or a hook to get back in later so that they can disrupt or destroy, depending on what their intentions are, your system and what your vulnerabilities are, your system at a later date. The name of that operation is called Volt Typhoon. That's one of their, I'd say, 150 advanced persistent threat teams we have identified doing this. And they've done it in several thousand locations that we've seen in the United States. They've done it in Taiwan and Japan and other places. And by the way, there's more APTs, advanced persistent threat teams, out there doing it as well. And what did they do? They perfectly hit exactly what we would consider most vulnerable for our national security, our economic productivity, and our public health and safety. And they get no value out of this. So there's no money, there's no ransomware, there's no nothing. This is purely preparing the battlefield. By the way, when the FBI director did this in January 2024, I know Josh and I were like, God damn, we got it. The enemy's finally helping us. We can sell cybersecurity as an important thing. About 2 weeks later, it's gone, right? But think about this. If the Chinese had said the same thing except taken 1,000 backpacks full of Semtech explosive, strapped it to the same critical infrastructure, said, F you from the PLA, that's the People's Liberation Army, stuck it on that, and then we found it, we'd probably be at war. But somehow, because it's cyber, we're like, we take a pass on it. This is what's crazy in our system. So that Volt Typhoon, and what they're attacking, as I said, national security, economic productivity, public health and safety. And look, the biggest one to me, by the way, is military mobility, and I need to explain this one to you. It drives me, how am I doing on time? Okay, good. On military mobility, look, if you want to stop our military, we're a great military, and we move fast, and we're the only military that can go 10,000 miles around the world and mess your day up. And that's all fantastic, except it relies on the private sector. The reality is there's 60,000 miles of rail in America. 20,000 are labeled strategic rail network. That's what the military uses when they need it. There's 850 passenger air terminals in America. The military's identified 69 that are strategic. There's 60 ports in America. America's identified 19 that are strategic. The fact that I'm giving you the specific number should tell you the next thing. It's unclassified, and we publish it. We don't want the Chinese to worry if they're hitting the right target or not. We tell them the target. And Volt Typhoon revealed they did it. Now, I'll just give you an example. Let's say I got to get my troops, we call it from forts to ports to overseas. I've got a tank that's in Texas, and it's got to get to Europe for a fight. What we do is we put the tank on a rail car, special car on a rail line on the base. We'll call it Fort Hood, Fort Cavazos, whatever you call it these days. And on that base, there's 2 power systems. There's 2 water systems. There's 2 comm systems. It's Josh Corman's, Noah's Ark of critical infrastructure. He's so happy, right? Everything's great. And the military's like, God damn it, we took care of it. And then the military, even because we're good neighbors, take care of the next 5 kilometers going off base. But then as it hits kilometer 6, the train goes from Noah's Ark to like Mad Max Thunderdome. I mean, the Chinese are everybody, except it's owned, that strip of 50 kilometers of rail, or 50 miles of rail, is owned by Uncle Fester's Rural Rail Collective number 23. Some dude is paid $150,000 a year to monitor that track line, to keep it clean, to do repairs to it. His big job is that steers die on it, get near it, get run over, and he's got to clear all the dead animals off. Except running underneath, that's a fiber optic network that controls the porting of the rail system, how 2 trains don't crash into each other when one's going in, one's going out. The Chinese can take control of that easily because Uncle Fester does not even know what Windows 3.6 say. He has no idea what a network is, what a server is. It's there. Somebody put it there. He's monitoring it as part of the contract. CISO? No. IT administrator? No. Aunt Peggy, turning the computer on and off? Yes. Right? That is not a defended system, and the Chinese figured it out. All right. That's the vulnerability. They're going to take advantage of it. And I try to think about how you fix this. I used to think, because I worked as an admiral, I worked for a big Senate committee called the Armed Services Committee. I ran its policy. I ran a federal commission. I thought top-down solution, right? We can create regulation, just push this down. I've come to the conclusion that is not going to happen. After 4 or 5 years, we can reorganize the federal government that way, and we did it. And our commission did a great job with that. We can fix the military that way, but you cannot fix the public-private collaboration from the top down. What I realized is the same thing, and that's why Josh and I partner on so many things, is that I've realized what he's realized as well. You have to fix this from the bottom up. You have to fix this at the town level, at the Uncle Fester level, at all that stuff. You cannot fix this top down. So what we need to do, we need to do bottom up fixes. We need to, at the rail system, aviation system, we're not talking about Chicago O'Hare here, right? And Atlanta Hartsfield. Those airports can fix themselves. They collect $5 every time you fly through. They can spend some of that money on cybersecurity. I'm talking about you go to Columbus Airport. If you go to Columbus Airport, it's this really weird airport where there's like 60 gates, but only 8 are running. As soon as I see an airport like that, I go, this is an Air Mobility Command major airport, because they pay to keep the other 50 gates working. You know, when I say working, like the jet bridge works, the connections work, the fueling station works. We make sure that. On cybersecurity, the Air Force goes, not our job. You needed cybersecurity to run those 8 gates. We're sure you're investing in it. I'm sure they're not. And so they're vulnerable, and that's what's going on. And then I think the other one is we sometimes miss the interconnectivity of it. And is that for me or total?
20 minutes of questions, 10 more explications.
Okay, got it, yeah. And then, thanks. He's giving me like calculus for figuring out how much longer I can talk. It's the intricacies of it. The fact that water, at FTD was the first sector we looked at, the think tank I'm at. And in 2021, we wrote what I think is a pretty rock solid piece called "The Weakest Link." In our national critical infrastructures. It's not just that water sucks, and oh my God, it sucks. And the EPA is horrific on a bipartisan 25-year basis. They're a failure as a government agency supposed to support the cybersecurity of water. But on top of it, it links to everything else. We all know hospitals don't run. I'm sure Josh will talk about that without water. Power, not the treated water, but the untreated water supports power, the cooling of power stations and things like that. So it's really integrated in there. So it's a very tough, it's very critical that we fix those. So I think we have to do these bottom-up fixes of all those things. So from my perspective, as they say in the movies, winter is coming, right? And there is going to be an attack. And here's the deal. China doesn't want to have a war with the United States. China wants to signal to the United States very aggressively, you should not support Taiwan. You don't signal with ballistic missiles or submarine attacks or air attacks. You signal with cyber. So we not only are cyber vulnerable, not only does the enemy know it, it is the most likely attack vector against the United States to get us to stand down, to get us to go, you know what? And it wouldn't take much to get President Trump to stand down. As I said earlier, he struggles to understand why Taiwan's important. But even other presidents, successor presidents, are going to struggle to explain to the American people that we need to go fight a war to support Taiwan, a country who they don't, if you ask Americans, where's Taiwan on a map, it's about 10%. And it's, by the way, more than 10% pick Thailand to be Taiwan, but, and the Philippines and the Hainan Island, but 10% know where Taiwan is. A similar percentage understand why Taiwan's important. I mean, I've explained it to you guys earlier. I know you guys probably knew that anyway, but there is a lack of understanding, and so telling the American people that we want to go fight a country that clearly can impose its will on us in cyberspace, and impact their quality of life to a significant degree, that we want to go fight a war overseas is very hard. So I'm very worried about where this is headed right now. And then finally what I'll say is they're conducting influence operations to say it's not us, it's somebody else. That there's a constant Chinese drumbeat storyline in the United States that's absorbed. And it's not as like, the Russians do it, but it's kind of like when you hear Tucker Carlson say shit, you're like, oh my God, that's got to be a lie. But the Chinese stuff is much more subtle, much more effective. The irony is the president talked about Chinese manipulation of the election system, which is true, they did. But the Chinese weren't trying to help Trump win or Trump lose in 2020. Very smartly, the Chinese were in our electoral systems telling blue states that manipulating blue states to a red state advantage and red states to a blue state advantage. What they were trying to do was convince the American electorate that our democracy doesn't function. It's a brilliant plan. It undermines us at our core, democracy and the will of the people. And then, of course, when they asked the president's people, are you going to investigate this Chinese thing that you just spent an hour on national TV discussing? And they said, no, we're not, because we don't want to ruin relations with China. And you're like, holy crap, we're describing these people as an adversary with Volt Typhoon, with elections. And our response is to not get involved. So from my perspective, we have to do it at a local level. And that's why I come to groups like this, where I talk about it, because you've got to, reinforce what Josh is doing. You've got to reinforce what others are doing to drive up local approaches to improving our cybersecurity so we have a better chance of success. All right, I think I'm wrapped there.
All right, we're going to set up this mic stand here. He's going to take 15 minutes or so. Bring your best skepticism, because I've heard some questions I couldn't field. He can field them. So I'm not saying exaggerate your beliefs, but I'll throw you one right now while we're getting the queue going. Yeah. Some people said, well, what if either this president or the next president, while we're doing political appointees in the spring, just let them do it? Are we safe? And why wouldn't the GDP hawks just let them take Taiwan?
Well, I think Wall Street would pressure the president to not let. Wall Street understands the numbers I said. That they drive $170 billion worth of compute that drives $4 to $5 trillion worth of economic development. That's high quality 1% shit, right? I mean, those guys are making a lot of money off this Taiwan trade. So I actually think the president doesn't say this out loud, but the thing that would temper throwing the towel in on Taiwan is Jamie Dimon and company doing it. And by the way, Jamie Dimon is suddenly come around on cyber in a big way. And two things have done it, not related to China. One is, his perception that AI has accelerated this beyond even companies like his who spend $1 billion on cybersecurity to do it. And two is, this president is absolutely not taking competent steps. Now, he won't say that out loud, but I'm pretty sure I know those are the two things.
You mentioned the Class 3 railroad unregulated, but Chicago's fine. They invest in cybersecurity. Meanwhile, CISA released a vulnerability last year where any bozo with a hack RF can stop every train for 50 miles, and the rail industry has said, we're not fixing it for 5 years, if that. By the way, we've known about it for 12, and we don't want to fix it. So, can you talk a little bit about the delay of it all, and also how do we deal with this kind of stuff where it's just I mean, they're not going to fix it, and they're heavily regulated, right?
I agree. Thanks. That's a great question. I love rail. I'm glad you brought up rail. Reminded me. I forgot to say the most important thing about rail. So here's the beauty of rail. You know this answer, so don't say it. Who knows who's the regulatory agency for rail in cyberspace? TSA? Yeah, the people who mug you at the airport when they're done doing that. They're then responsible for pipelines. We found out I'm going to tell you, 90% of the American government, maybe 95%, found out they're in charge of pipeline cybersecurity, after Colonial, or an hour into Colonial. They're like, who the hell is this vice admiral from TSA showing up at these meetings saying I'm in control? It's like Al Haig. That's too old for most of you, but at the White House. And so TSA, you're right. And what did TSA do immediately? They tried to take the Colonial pipeline regulations and apply them to the rail industry, and the two industries aren't alike at all, and it was a disaster. Do I think again that when it's I'm at the point where you can't say the word regulation, or Republicans won't do it, and you can't have grant programs for companies because the Democrats don't like it. So we're trying to write legislation together that bundles them together and says, here's a standard that TSA, CISA, and the rail industry have agreed to. Here's an assessment tool that you can either pay a private sector company to do, or if you're a big company, you can do it yourself. You generate a gap analysis, and then here's a grant program. Now, not if you're a publicly traded company or someone who makes money, a private one that makes money. But if you're a state and local utility, which is a lot of these Group 3 ones, you can apply for this grant program. Therefore, you're willing to expose the gap. Most people don't want to do that assessment, even if they know they're in trouble, for fear of creating a liability challenge for themselves when said gap is exposed and you didn't fix it and you knew it. The only thing worse than getting attacked and failing is getting attacked, failing, and finding out after the fact you knew about the root cause. That's when the lawsuit, the lawyers start to crack their knuckles like, I'm going to make some real money here. So that's how I think you do it. I got some legislation on this. I don't have a lot of brave congressmen because that's what you need. But thanks. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your talk. I wanted to ask, in the event like a mid-sized city, Columbus, Ohio, gets hit by something like Volt Typhoon, like what are the consequences for the city that you're expecting? Is it are you mostly concerned about this airport just doesn't work?
Yeah.
What is the translation from the cyber effects into physical effects you expect?
That's a great point. And I should say, I think things like Volt Typhoon will happen everywhere all at once, right? In other words, so one of the first things I'll tell you is no help is coming. There is no cavalry, all right? The answer is a mixture of, in the immediate sense of a lack of provision of services, but in the long-term sense, there's going to be, there could be financial repercussions if you are contractually obligated to provide services and don't, and particularly if you knew about a problem or should have reasonably known about it. And most of these when an issue is there was a patch notification out for 37 days and I hadn't installed it, that's reasonable. It doesn't matter that the average patch installation is still in the 60 days in America. In court, it's about, a judge will give you about 2 daes. I mean, I don't think this has been tested really legally at a high level, but most judges are going to be like, I fix things, if there's a hole in a boat, the boat captain doesn't go, I'll fix that within the next 60 days, to speak of another patch. But in cyber, we're like, if you treated patches the same way, like I said, a hole in a boat and a hole in your cyber system, why do we give 60 days? Why is, so there's going to be liability protection. But look, that lack of services, and here's the real problem. Right now, there's going to be no help. If you're under Volt Typhoon, and by the way, Volt Typhoon isn't that you go down once, is that as you recover, they have a second malicious either piece of malware or hook in to take you down again. We don't believe that these are one-offs. When they want to do this, it's a strong signaling message that you, America, are not ready. Look, everyone in this room knows this. I think everyone in here knows we're not ready. The question is when you go out on that floor right there and grab someone who's losing money off one of those machines and ask them, do you think we're ready? They don't know. And if they think the answer is no, they don't know why. That's what's scary about this, is that everything you know in here, the Chinese know, and they'll exploit the fact that your fellow citizens don't understand this. Thanks.
When you're thinking about Chinese influence operations, I assume that you're also taking a look at specifically social media platforms. Yeah. Which platforms are you keeping an eye on, both in terms of intelligence gathering or in manipulation of users? And just because Josh pointed it out, I do work for TikTok, so formerly a national security threat, now we're cool.
Yeah. So so I'll start by saying that I'm proud to have written the legislation that banned TikTok, and and I wrote the amicus brief that Supreme Court, the Chief Justice Roberts used as the basis of his 9 validation when he wrote the majority opinion. So I do believe TikTok, for social media manipulation, it's number one. But it's not number one for data collection. There's others that are more effective. I think that they're inside, that they exploit the amount of data we give to insurance providers, the amount of data we give to public payment platforms, and then understanding what you're buying. So, there's a lot of other ways to get your personal data besides TikTok. What TikTok is that I think it's the alleged manipulation of the algorithm to create a narrative that is, 10 or 20% more likely to be anti-U.S. than, say, an Instagram narrative. That's, to me, is the big one. But they use all that. Here's the other one they use. Most of you probably do not read Mandarin press in America, Mandarin language press in America. But 95% of Mandarin language press is actual from the CCP. The Chinese Communist Party puts it out, and they pay for that press. Why is that important? That means Chinese Americans who are good American citizens, but the ones who read, who get their news in Mandarin, because that's their preferred language. Like I generally get my news in English. That's my preferred language. They get it from that, but they're getting the state-delivered information That's exceptionally dangerous. There's nothing else like this in the world, and I'm for a free press. I just wish we had a balanced free press.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. You're gonna be banned again. We just need another president.
You had said something about like water allocation and availability, and it just got me thinking about just resource allocation and availability. Just from your perspective, do you have any thoughts of, because the biggest threat to water is kind of data centers right now, especially in like drier areas. So have you had any discussions or any because I don't have purview, what your thoughts are on what people are thinking about this?
So thanks. That's a good question. Congress had a hearing on this. I testified on data centers, and it was the water and power, clearly the two big ones. Look, I think data centers should solve for their own water. In other words, have a water reuse, and maybe not have water as the cooling medium, because then you can't recapture the loss. But that's a trade space. I would go county by county, though. There'll be counties where power is a bigger problem versus water, and others where water will be a bigger problem versus power. So I don't think there's a ubiquitous, a clean solution for every county, but I do think it's something we have to account for. But I share your concern about it. I will tell you. Oh, by the way, that Taiwan thing on the 4 to 5 trillion. Do you think that number is going up or down as we drive into AI and data centers, which are driven almost exclusively by the semiconductor chips, the logic chips that come from China, that come from Taiwan? So it's going to be even bigger.
Are people, I guess, are the policymakers talking about something?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't want to get into the questions. So you can watch the testimony, but some of on the far right and far left, the kind of questions I got were a little crazy, but crazy informed by fear, right? So they are fearing this, and sometimes fear is a good skill. I mean, it's a good trait. Yeah.
All right. First off, thank you for coming and joining all us weirdos here. Secondly, I'm curious about your thoughts on Taiwan's so-called Silicon Shield, especially as it relates to the onshoring of foundries.
Yeah. So look, we are not going to get off of Taiwan. So the Silicon Shield exists. Taiwan needs to be careful how they talk about it in front of a guy like Trump, because he doesn't like to be told he's wrong. And the Silicon Shield would make him wrong. By the way, he also says Taiwan stole TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Chips. There's a book called The Chip Wars, kind of explains how that didn't happen. Book doesn't have a lot of pictures, so I don't think the president's read it. But the Silicon Shield's real, and you can't buy out of it, right? So we did a beautiful CHIPS Act, $59 billion of our taxpayer money, and in the end, it will get us about 3 to 4% closer to self-sufficient, needing to be 100%. So if you do that, you need 33 times more, 60 billion. That's a lot of trillions of dollars. I think that's highly unlikely. So in government investment. So from my perspective, and plus we don't have the STEM workforce, we don't have the talk about power and water coming in for those foundries. What we need to do is preserve our relationship with Taiwan. It's okay to have a dependency if you manage your risk with that dependency. And look, we had the same thing in memory chips. It's 70% from Taiwan, about 20% from Micron, a U.S. company, and 10% from random companies. But if that 70%, Korea, 70% for Korea. If that 70% of that Korean stuff went away, because North Korea invaded South Korea, we'd have a problem. They're the dumber chips, the less expensive chips, but you need those. Almost every legacy chip has several memory chips attached to it. So, and Micron can't cover down for a loss of Korea. Yes, sir.
All right. So I realize that socially and politically, the China relationship is very different from depending on which way you're looking at this. We've talked a lot about what their pressure points on us are and how they might keep us back. Yeah. And I know we can't count on this, but surely we must be doing the same thing in reverse. What is there? Josh is already shaking his head. Yeah. What are our point? What's the mutually assured destruction scenario? What do we have on them?
So they need. So they're trying hard not to be dependent on us, but they are dependent on us. I mean, they can't do they can't do the high-end chips. They can't do some of the specific microelectronics from Taiwan. There's a lot of. They don't have our brains. I mean, let's be clear. When I say that, I mean our entrepreneurial spirit wedged in a high-end university system that produces all kinds of crazy shit ideas. Even when the guys don't end up graduating and women don't graduate from college because they quit as freshmen or sophomores, the great companies, the great entrepreneurship is here. The problem is we leave ourselves exposed to theft very quickly, and you're seeing that in AI, by the way. Even when we say, "Oh shit, this is important," and we got to protect it, it still gets stolen. So I think we got to do a better job protecting our emerging technologies from theft. And you would think the companies would want to do that. It's their intellectual property, but you'd be surprised how unhelpful they are.
So kind of going back to the CHIPS Act and the onshoring, a lot of those initial stage onshore fabs are scheduled to kind of come online prior to kind of your spring 2028 timeline that you were talking about. How do you see that affecting either positively or negatively things?
Well, I hope a president isn't fooled that getting 5% off is enough. I will say this: the thing I would like to do in rare earths and in some of these fabs is that what the Department of Defense needs, those your national security needs, and DoD. I know we all look at the Defense Industrial Base like it's this massive Borg of ruination, and it's not fantastic, but it's only 5% of our demand signal for a lot of these things. Now, in batteries, for example, like we're all worried about the F-35 batteries. The F-35 production line needs like 600 pounds of battery a year. I promise you, Detroit needs a lot more than 600 pounds of battery per year, right? So what I'd like to see by 2028 is that if we're in a pressure situation where because of blockades and other things, we can't continue to produce, that at least our military can continue to produce weapons to break the blockade to then free it up for the other 95%. That would be a great thing. When you say, like, I want a home shore, not ally shore, not friend shore, home shore, I would home shore enough of things so that the military-industrial complex can get its work done. It doesn't have to always be drawing it. It just has to be there.
We shift to speed round.
Yeah, speed round. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll answer in 30 seconds.
Thank you very much for coming in. What do you see the role of Russia in this Taiwan situation? How do you see them? Do you think that China's going to call in debts for their help with Russia?
So they already have. The number one thing, so Ukraine is fighting 4 countries, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. The payback for Russia, for China from Russia has given China submarine quieting technology. That neutralizes our most important aspect. And they're also training them on how to do a cross-strait airborne assault like Apocalypse Now kind of thing. Only 2 countries in the world could do that, Russia and America. The Russians have now trained the Chinese, so 3. So it's been very military support. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. We know things don't happen in isolation, and I'm thinking of the bigger blast radius and the influence China has on other groups in the Fab 4, like Iran, like DPRK, and how we should be looking at this in terms of this bigger conflict and perhaps their role coming into 2028.
So I published a book last week called Axis of Aggressors with 2 other people at my think tank, and it describes that exactly. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm probably required by law to mention this book. Axis of Aggressors is on Amazon. It explains how the 4 countries are working together. And I wrote the cyber and technology ones, and it's offensive cyber operations, where it's really hacker communities, criminal activity between the 4 countries where they work together, but also R&D, technology theft, and creating of an internet that crushes sovereignty. Yes, sir.
Whenever you try to learn from history, the reason why America even exists, whenever it comes down to it, is because of logistics. Basically, England could not go all the way across the ocean. And whenever you look at Vietnam, Korea, all the rest of them, it's logistics that actually win or don't win. So if you're fighting on home territory, you win.
Yeah.
Taiwan is how many miles off of China? Logistically, how do we solve that problem? Because, and the other part of this is why if China really wants to play chicken, if they simply kill all of the fab in Taiwan, we've already seen just in the last few years, whenever there's a chip shortage, how much it affects us compared to them. Yeah. So how do we balance that?
So I think at this point they're as dependent on Taiwan as we are. So that I don't worry about that as much. But you're absolutely right. Logistically, there was a famous general or admiral named Admiral King who kind of ran our World War II things, and he goes, "I don't know what this logistics is, but I want more of it." So it's I agree with you. All right, one last question.
One last. So Mark, as our current useless war depletes our resources in the military, how does that change your date?
Look, we're in a lot of trouble. In fact, if you watch the Trump administration, they're very careful now. They say we have enough munitions to defeat Iran. That's a much different thing than we have enough munitions for the war with China or Russia, which are much bigger. So we're in a munitions thing. If you look my name up in the word munitions, you'll see a series of articles from 2020 till now every year. I whinge about this, that we were taking too much risk in munitions, and that the chickens have come home to roost now. We are absolutely in the hurt locker. My son's on a Navy ship right now off of in the North Arabian Sea, and I worry that, does his ship have enough weapons every day to do their job? It's very worrisome to me. So that's a very significant issue.
So, did I have truth in advertising? Is he a strong cup of coffee? Mark is going to run up to Sky Talks to do the unfiltered edition of this.
I don't know.
But thank you, Mark, for doing this. If you like what you've heard, Dean, a medical professional, Mark and I had done a couple of critical effect. There's some more recordings. More to come. If you had 10 more minutes, I was going to ask you about last week's attack from Iran and how we should be thinking about that for resilience. But
boy, they didn't do much, did they? That's what's scary about that. They demonstrated a capability and didn't show you the scope of what they could do to you. You know they could deny and disrupt.
My last quote in the New York Times this morning is, the campaign felt a lot like a pre-attack staging, not the attack itself. The level of access is sufficient.
If you continue to plagiarize my thoughts, Josh, I'm not coming.
The level of access is sufficient for significantly more harm than has been seen.
You're correct.
All right, let's give it up one more time for Mark. Thanks.
Please grab a seat or take your questions outside because we got to go. We got to go.
Yes. That's right here.
I am pleased and delighted to welcome to the stage Mr. Josh Corman, who's one of the founders for I Am the Cavalry, which is now celebrating its 13th year. And this has been a great session so far. We're going to talk about what to do over the next 12 months. So please bring your thoughts, your ideas. There will be times of interactivity. And please join me in welcoming Mr. Josh Corman.
All right. Let's see if I can do a better job placing this than last time. All right, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. I'm going to wave to my wife and little baby. Hello. On the streaming. Yep, I saw that. Safety third, right? I'm straddling the power cable here. All right. Who was here for the opening on Monday? It feels like a week ago. Okay. All right, so there's enough hands that we're not. I may have to do some reinforcement, a tiny bit more stage setting. And one of the reasons I say everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face is, boy, this Iran stuff has really upset the apple cart. Mostly when I'm in the hallway or not at a party or not singing karaoke like I did briefly last night. I'm still doing incident response and triage on this stuff and still talking to press. And still talking to EPA and so I'm going to change a little bit of this. This was mostly going to be a synthesis of the last 2.5 days towards giving you some inspiration for what the homework could be for you, for your family, for your community for the next 12 months. We're still going to do some of that, but I have to pivot there just given how much has happened and how high the consequences could be. We also like to do some room work, so we like to hear from you. So when the time comes for the mic to be in the aisle, probably right about there, we will need you to start thinking about, so your homework immediately is, what was the strongest thing you heard this week? What's the weakest thing you heard this week? What's the key takeaway? What was your biggest surprise? Because your insight and epiphany is only valuable to you unless you share and spread it. So I heard quite a few in the hallways and at breakfast and in the coffee line, but this is the part of the program where we want to solicit this from you so that your peers can also hear this. I may ask and tag in for a guest speaker or two briefly. As soon as I get eye contact, I think he's in the restroom. So I'm going to play this a little bit by feel. So thing number one, I Am the Cavalry was born right here at B-Sides Las Vegas on August 1st, 13 years ago. So we are a gawky adolescent teenager. So please say happy birthday. Okay. Okay. I am not the Cavalry. You are. It's a personal commitment. The idea was our dependence on connected technology was growing faster than our ability to secure it in areas affecting public safety, economic, and national security. But really what we said is wherever bits and bytes meet flesh and blood. Boy, did we take a lot of shit for that. Nobody thought it would happen. It's never going to happen. No one would do it. No one would ever hack cars. There's no money in it. Medical devices go through extremely, precautious safety things. There's analog measures for these. We heard all of this. This is one of those situations where you don't want to be right, but I think we've shaken it off. We've been patiently impatient. We've been consistent and kind. We've tried to use empathy. And through that empathy and meeting people where they are, we built the trust relationships with the medical community, the water community, the federal government. You heard Leonard Bailey's keynote. We leaned into uncomfortable places across a divide and tried to build trust, common cause, common purpose. And it has paid off pretty well. And it's because people in the room here are the volunteers that have an idea, that stick with that idea, that try something, and that they take help from their peers to make it a stronger, better, more likely to succeed idea. So that's your minimum viable, I Am the Cavalry history lesson. Okay. Even people at this conference last night didn't know that Iran hit U.S. water last week. The talent pool is here in Vegas this week. Some of them are at Black Hat doing the commercial capitalist thing. Some of them are going to be at DEF CON doing the puzzler, protector, prestige thing. This is the one that's the protectors and puzzlers. This is the one that's more civically minded. And even here at this conference, our friends don't know. So one of your homework assignments is please strike up a conversation about, as things get real, how can we use our talents to protect our household, our town, our county, our state? We have answers to some of those. We have projects for some of those. We have hamburger helper kits for some of those. And it's kind of go time, unfortunately. Here I am with the Undisruptable 27 project, u27.org. There's plenty of stickers. There's water hammers. There's the No Water, No Hospital, No Kidding stickers. Because there's some hands in here that hadn't been here Monday, I may show one of the 4-minute videos real quickly. But we've been oriented towards Volt Typhoon as early as 2027. As you just heard from Mark, it's actually probably spring of 2028. My money's on March of 2028. There's reasons for that I'm surprised he didn't say because he used to do Pacific Command. There's a 5-week period in mid-March where it's the least treacherous to cross the Taiwan Strait with Navy vessels. So there's a 3-week period in September that's also less treacherous. But there's 2 little windows in any given calendar year. And if that's the most likely year, we're getting a pretty good idea of when things could get pretty interesting on U.S. soil. Doesn't mean it's a guarantee. It's a fluid situation. It moved forward and backward since I started this project. Craig Newmark of Craigslist has funded this project, close to $5 million total, since we launched it here 2 Augusts ago. And we've got about 1 year left on this event horizon to use that money as intended. And a lot of it's going further because of the talent in this room that participates in our Slack channel, that takes this to their town, that gives us new ideas, that brings us the feedback, that says this didn't work at all, don't ever do that again. I love those pieces of feedback. So what I'm about to show is just a smattering of screenshots, maybe a little bit of video, not a lot of slides. I'd rather do some room work. Hopefully if you're in the room for Mark Montgomery, that's some pretty direct candor. You can go fact check him or you can go debate him, but it's a pretty strong, unequivocal point of view. And I still disagree with him on some pieces, but I'm hoping you see this isn't just Josh talking in a HackerCon. There's quite a few current and former national security people that are very happy that a bunch of hacker volunteers are on this wall. Because it is not happening as it could or should within the federal government. So the New York Times, I'm not going to read this much, but we're finally getting past the initial nauseating stories of is it or isn't it Iran, or is it 3 states or 5 states? Like we're past a dozen states now. There's at least 100 confirmed victims so far. And Joe Slowick, who just presented yesterday, what's interesting to me is all the mainstream press, like the New York Times, like the Washington Post, like NPR, like Politico, they got sources in this news cycle from this room. This room. Yesterday, they watched the stream. So you got Joe Slowick, EPA, which gets a bad rap. Mark was just pretty hard on the EPA, mostly deservedly so. But if you were here yesterday, and if you didn't watch it, Cole from EPA, a young guy we're investing in, has a good heart, is trying to do the best he can with the information he has and the authorities he has, and he became the subject of this morning's Morning Politico. So, we're doing the work in this room. Please be part of that work. All right, so this is not going to read the article. Okay, let's do a quick guided exercise. Ready? I'm not sure it's going to work, but I follow my heart sometimes. Okay. Who took a shower today? Who knows the DEF CON rules, right? What is it? What's the rules? Someone? 3, 2, 1. What's the 3 stand for? 3 hours of sleep. 2 meals. 1 shower. Okay. Most of us got the memo eventually. It was pretty rough in those first 10 years, but DEF CON, I can smell it. All right. Okay. This is a shower head. We all have the same shower head if you're staying in this hotel. Not my favorite shower head. It's not really BITS compliant, if you know Jen Ellis. It's not a BITS compliant shower. But as you took the shower this morning, were you thinking about yesterday's talks? Or, you turn on the water comes out, maybe it's clean, maybe it's safe, maybe it's warm. But I don't want you to think about your hotel shower head. I want you to think about your shower. Just close your eyes for a minute. I kind of wish I had a better shower head. Maybe I'll go to Home Depot and buy another one. But I know what my shower head looks like. It stares me in the face every morning. Before I even have coffee in my system, I want you to think of, you probably turn on the faucet, and your muscle memory kind of knows exactly where the heat spot is, right, to warm it up. And then maybe you tap it down to the steady state. But I want you to use your nose, your strongest memory. What does your shower smell like? Is it your shampoo? Is it your spouse's body soap? Is it some level of soap scum or the minerals in your water? But be there in your shower. And we turn on that faucet, and we get that hot, warm water or whatever. What if that doesn't turn on? Right? The next time you're in that shower, don't think of me, but think of, we take this for granted. And we've heard from Dean, and we've heard from CISA, and we've heard from EPA. We've got 151,000 water plants. 55,000 of them serve your home communities. 420 to 600, depending on who you asked yesterday, are in the ISAC. None of them have mandatory cybersecurity relationships. I do want to call out and punctuate, the state of New York does have some. They just passed it into law. They are pioneering. They have grant programs. My state has a free $50,000 grant program for some cyber assistance if you fill out a form. So it's not that no one's doing anything, but no one is protecting that water. Of course, no water is no hospitals, but think about how every single day you depend on that. And think about, can your skills be brought to bear to ensure that you continue to enjoy that and your family continues to enjoy that? So I don't think having a lack of shower is the biggest consequence here. But the next time you're there, I want you to have a reminder that we have the skills and the opportunity to do something about it. Okay, maybe that was a bad idea. You tell me later. Okay, so just so we take nothing for granted, I'm not going to go through everything we did the other day, but this project is called Undisruptible 27. The idea is that we are highly disruptible. We went from a long period of adversaries that want to steal something, like information, or ransom you for money. But now we have a couple adversaries who want to disrupt and destroy. Ostensibly Volt Typhoon, People's Liberation Army, as part of their Taiwan conflict and unrestricted warfare, but now also Iran, taking lots of aggressive action in broad daylight last week. The general idea of the cavalry is that we're over-dependent on undependable things, and through that over-dependence, we expose ourselves to accidents and adversaries. One of my favorite things from Bo is malicious intent is not a prerequisite to harm. So even though China is not trying to hurt hospitals, taking out water will hurt hospitals. Why? because no water is no hospital in 2 to 4 hours. Plenty of studies on this. They asked all 6,000 hospitals, what's your downtime tolerance? Why? What breaks first, second, third? And they're at 94% uncapable or 96% uncapable. I'll play the video, you'll see the little font, within 2 to 4 hours. It's usually HVAC, et cetera. In the summer, it's 45 minutes because you have to evacuate because it's too hot. I'm not okay with this. I'm pissed off about this. I want you pissed off about this. So while there's 151,000 water plants, 55,000 are surface water, only 6,000 of them support one of the nation's hospitals. And this will be the highest consequence failure to loss of life, but also a crisis of confidence of the public, or psychological effect is what we call that. How's my space and diction? I think I told you all I had some surgery, so I have to enunciate better in my mouth. Okay. So part of being pissed off in the opening talk is the Dylan Thomas poem, but I want you to be filled with some righteous rage. I don't want us to be blindingly angry, but I want you to say, yes, we're in danger. Yes, we feel powerless. Yes, we wish the government was more competent. Yes, we wish we had more political cohesion across the aisle. All the things that you could tell yourself as to why this isn't your problem or why we wish we had a different climate. I don't get the luxury of those. I'm asking you to say, what am I willing and able to do in spite of all that? You can be overcome by those, or you can just say, if no one's coming to save me, what can I do? And I'd like to foster that level of defiance in you. Okay. So I'm going to play a video. We have things like water hammers we learned about from Dean and others. This is a property of physics, force equals mass times acceleration, and with the existing access of our PLCs, of our control systems, of our HMIs, one can affect destructive capabilities with your own tools. So if someone's logging into a programmable logic controller with no password directly on the internet, they can do what you can do. And one of those things that we thought China might do is burst water mains, which looks something like this. So I'm not even in PowerPoint mode. I'm just trying to refresh our memory. Okay. And then I'll go into PowerPoint for a second. So just to visualize this, if you're more visual and shape-oriented than numbers-oriented, here's a bunch of water, 151,000. A third of them, 55K, are in fact community water systems that service a community 365 days out of the year. These are the more important ones. 6,000 of them touch a hospital. No water pressure is no hospital. That's where I'm focused. If everything's critical, nothing is. So this particular initiative is we're directly assisting 12 U.S. hospital communities to innovate narrowly and then replicate widely. We want half red states, half blue states. We want small, medium, rural. We want one that's below sea level. We want one in the mountains. We want one on a port. We want one in the middle of farmland. So we're trying to fuzz the edges of, can we surface enough of these to surface which cyber-informed engineering solutions from Idaho National Labs playbook we can bring to bear. And instead of saying the threats come from cyber, let's meet them with cyber and give them all Dragos or CrowdStrike or stuff they don't know how to operate. By the way, most of the ways Volt Typhoon gets in is known exploited vulnerabilities in cybersecurity products from Avanti, Fortinet, Palo Alto, Cisco. I'm not kidding. Look it up. So I don't think the answer is cyber. Our hypothesis that we're testing is the threats may come from cyber, but the solutions come from engineering. Really smart problem solvers like Dean, and he's considered one of the dumb ones in his field. They have a professional, he keeps coming here and he keeps trusting me for food recommendations. So grateful for the teamwork from Dean. He came and sat there and heckled us the first year just as an observer. We asked him to speak the second year. He starts leading our thought the third year. Now he's helping us prep for congressional testimonies and doing water hammer demos in front of them. So really, really grateful for that ambassador trust like you saw from Leonard. We do it with water people. We do it with hospital people. So this is the nexus of the most critical of the critical. Mark hinted at this. We have slightly different reasons, but the timing is Xi Jinping said he wanted to take Taiwan as early as 2027, hence the yellow. Whatever year they pick, whenever they're ready, and they're not going to go prematurely. Whenever they're ready, it's probably going to be this 5-week period in mid-March or this 3-week period in September. And for a bunch of reasons in a dynamic fluid assessment, everybody's kind of leaning towards spring or March of 28. What he didn't say, but I'll say, is we have political appointees, and they take time to get Senate confirmed. And there's a lot of loss of momentum at these times. I've been directly in CISA for emergency federal service. I've watched friends do this. There's a lot of rumor mill. The important ones get done kind of quickly, but if our inauguration is in January, what's the likelihood that we have the most important people politically appointed and in their seat and knowing where the bathrooms are in time? It usually takes CISA still does not have a Senate confirmed director right now, and it's one of the most important agencies for domestic resilience. And that's not a partisan point per se, but some of these can take, I think even during the pandemic, Jen Easterly took till July, I want to say. So it can take months and months. And then once they're in, it takes a long time to figure out where the bathrooms are and who you can trust and who you can't and what you should be working on. So there's a very large amount of loss of momentum for this whole calendar year. So we're going to be in a state of flux based on how our democratic muscles work, no matter who wins. So we think it's coming and coming soon, but that's not even the Iranian situation. And am I going too fast? This is good? Okay. You got to do my time checks. Okay. The issue I tried to pose is that we've been so focused on this. This is an already hard problem, and it shouldn't be falling to a bunch of hackers in Vegas, but it was. But then the Iranian conflict starts kicking up, and unlike China, who doesn't want to kill Americans, because that would bring us into a war with them, we're already in one with Iran, and they have often wanted death to infidels, death to a great Satan, death to Americans, especially if it's a retaliation. And as we learned from Cheryl, their mantra is often revenge is a dish best served cold. They have very long memories, they're very tenacious, and they are very willing to make us pay in kind for the things that we have done to them in their beliefs or opinions, or sometimes in fact. And the frontier labs are making this even scarier. But that's a different discussion for a different day, so I'm skipping all that. So here's where we're going to go. We had intended, with our theory of change, that we would get through all 12 of our pilots right around now, and then we go back after recess and start whispering to the committees of jurisdiction that we'd already told about this. We go back to the Office of the National Cyber Director in the White House, which is currently Sean Cairncross, and we'd remind them what we told them, and we'd have a concept of operations, say we have 12 proven success stories where for under $10,000, we engineered down the highest consequences of failure in a hospital town on their pressure zone. No matter what the adversary throws, we can still provide care to patients. About 10K or less. Would you like to fund all 6,000? Or would you like to do some some executive orders? Or would you like to have some hearings? Or would you like to take this and lift it and shift it into a named operation like Operation Warp Speed and give it back to CISA and maybe constitute more power and budget for CISA? Whatever that might be. Again, we have plans, other people have different plans. So Congress started getting very worried. So in mid-March, some of us testified that's a programmable logic controller. At the time, it was not one of the models affected by the Iranian attack campaign. I found out yesterday, nope, that one is too now. So some of the people I thought were safe, including one of my pilots, is no longer safe. But those little devices are very vulnerable, very exposed, and very powerful. And I tried to tell the room, please do not take these heavy things to let them destroy us. We have to keep our humor, keep our joy. So Ginger Wright from INL and I had the joy to testify together and keep being happy warriors. If you're going to fight this fight, it's a long fight. So make sure you can be a happy warrior with love in your heart and empathy for the people that we're going to encounter. Okay. So that's it for that one. But the theme was do not go gentle. Okay. Rage, rage, rage against the dying of the light. So I told you I'm not only able to look at Iran anymore, unfortunately. This is our countdown clock for 2027. None of us think it's going to happen at the stroke of midnight in 2027. But just to remind yourself, this is closer than you might think. We talked about and announced a sprint we're calling glasshouses.ai. So you can go to glasshouses.ai if you want to sign up for one of these things. I'll be buying a lot of food today and tomorrow to see who wants to talk about, maybe contributing, co-chairing, giving us some seed thoughts for any of those 5 things. In fact, if you remind me, I'll pull up the URL at the end. But we have maybe only a little bit more than 100 days till 2027. And once you get people to say, yes, I agree, I'm going to do something, it could take a very, very, really long time to affect change in a town. So when we get a strong lead for a pilot, sometimes we're in a courtship for 6 months before we can get a single meeting. So as urgent as this is, the people we're encountering are ice cold. So it might be fresh in year 3 for me. It's day 1, day 0 for them. So just a reminder that time is short. All right, we have a ton of videos. If you go to u27.org, Craig's been paying for these. The woman who runs this creative arts firm that's been doing these extremely cheaply for us is actually family to one of our speakers yesterday. So I thought that's pretty awesome. And she's completely bought into this. So she's been very generous and patient with a really heavy subject matter. They're not perfect videos, but we're about to do a lot more, a lot higher quality, a lot faster for more stakeholder types. So even if you're not technical, I want you to be an A/B tester on some of our embryonic videos because there's about to be a lot more. So you can get those at u27.org now. The one I'm probably going to pay for you right now, I think it's a good instinct, is this one. So repeat for some of you, which you get a second chance to criticize it. First time for most of you. This was to show that even though we think Congress is incredibly broken, the House Science Committee had no daylight between the Republicans and the Democrats, and people who weren't even on the subcommittee begged to come speak and ask questions. So we had additional participation, including my favorite question from a rep from Texas. Here we go. Oh, no. I need to put my glasses on. Wah, wah. You got the audio going? Nope.
There's an old saying, water is life.
Hold on. There we go. I'm going to start over.
There's an old saying, water is life, and this is exactly what we're talking about today.
A cyber attack on water systems could lead to widespread ramifications. It could also severely impact emergency response operations, hospitals, firefighters, and food production.
Yet, the systems that we depend on every day are increasingly vulnerable.
In January 2024, the water system in Muleshoe, Texas, was reportedly hacked, leading to thousands of gallons of water spilling into the street. What concerns me is not just that these systems are being targeted, but how unevenly prepared they are to respond across the country.
In February 2023, PRC-affiliated Volt Typhoon compromised a Massachusetts water facility.
The idea that Iran, China, or Russia could shut off or poison our drinking water sounds like a plot from a blockbuster thriller. But unfortunately, it's a reality.
Outrageously, Chinese military units known as Volt Typhoon are in our systems now. Not eventually, not maybe, right now.
Given the increasing activity from Iran, China, you name it, what's the biggest threat in your mind?
Initially, they were looking at military bases, the ability to degrade and delay our forced mobilization. Even a day or two could advantage their advance on Taiwan. But the second wave was non-combatant civilian infrastructure, like the 10,000-person town in Littleton, Massachusetts. And the purpose of that leg was to sow chaos on civilian infrastructure to undermine public support for our intervention. Most of the successful compromises from Volt Typhoon into U.S. water have been through known edge devices or even security remote access technologies, which have CISA known exploited vulnerabilities associated with them.
You've told us that hospitals can only operate on 2 to 4 hours once water is cut off. If Chinese hackers activated its access in Houston today, walk me through what the following 72 hours would look like.
A typical hospital uses about 250 gallons per bed per day. So it's unbelievable amounts of water. So it's surgery, scrubbing, sanitation, hydrating patients, chemical tests for labs. Air conditioning is one of the top users. At some point, especially in the heat of the summer, you're gonna have to evacuate people who just had surgery or might be on life support. It's a pretty harrowing thing.
What can CISA and sector risk management agencies like EPA do to work with private industry to identify and eliminate pre-positioned cyber attacks?
When I look at how difficult it is for one of our best funded water systems, one of our peak level of operations for cybersecurity, they too are worried they can't keep pace with the Chinese military. Let's mitigate the full extent of damage. These are things like making a circuit breaker, such that a water hammer, which is a destructive force of turning the valve on or off too quickly, it can shatter pipes. So what do? Let's have a pressure sensor that if it goes over a certain level, it disables the pump. But we can keep the highest consequence failures from doing damage. So the threat may come from cyber, but the solutions come from engineering. It's not always shields up. Sometimes it's connections down.
Can we make sure that small and rural systems get the resources that they need to prevent being the next headline?
My project on Disruptable 27 is an example of applied research and how I'm fighting back. We're identifying familiar, affordable, and effective engineering mitigations so that if a punch is thrown from any predator, we know that we're able to take that punch. We're innovating narrowly with 12 U.S. hospital communities such that we can replicate widely to the rest. A workshop in New Hampshire, utility produced 5 mitigations. Something like this pressure release valve. that can maybe be a shock absorber from one of these water hammers. Let me wrap up by saying we are prone, we are prey, but we are not powerless. We hope Undistributable lights the way for others looking to develop actionable solutions in this most dangerous period. Okay. I'm going to call somebody up in a minute. That's your 3-minute warning, not yet. Your biggest piece of homework right now, and I'm behind, we need to do 12 of these pilots. Some of them have rotted on the vine. Some of them got scared. Some of them didn't follow through. I'm going to show you a tiny, and watch your faces. I'm trying to aim for 3 minutes. It might be 5. I'm going to show you generally what we did with one of our pilots so that you can get an idea if that you nominate one of your towns, this is what you might experience, okay? And then I'm going to show one of our volunteers and how he's pitching his town so you can see that it's not just the ones that come up and talk. We have a lot of people in Slack who are comparing notes. He's one of the 3 that have done the most work honing their pitch to their community. Okay, here we go. This town, so we have 5 by 5 is what we call it. There's 5 major stakeholders that we want to try to convene. I can probably get away with just doing 2 or 3 of them, but I'd like to have all 5. Those 5 are who's in charge of the water in your town, who's in charge of the healthcare delivery in your town, who's the city planner that can maybe approve, disapprove, get in the way, add fuel, add funding, look at competing equities. So who's the city planner or city manager? They have different titles. We invite the power because power tends to be a bit more mature on this, thanks to people like Emma and people like NRECA and people like Dave Botts. Power tends to be a better mentor and can validate some of this stuff. And number 5 is crucial to me. It's the county level emergency manager that would declare an ICS because they often surface and shatter assumptions that your town might have. So those 5 people do 5 steps. We do a joint education, a joint simulation, a co-creation on CIE, an implementation, and a documentation. So for the first day and a half, we'll do a tour of the water facility for all 5 so they can see where their water comes from and make them the hero of their story. We'll give them a what is Volt Typhoon, when is it, why is it, how is it going to do it, and we'll answer all their questions. We then do a 2 to 3 hour lightweight tabletop simulation against their map of the town. What's your highest consequence stakeholders? What could happen? We'll find things like, oh, it's okay if it happens to us. We'll call in mutual aid. And then the EMS person will say, the hell you will. All of our resources are going to go to these 2 trauma centers. We don't have enough. So if this is happening the way Josh says, you're on your own. So if you know that in a tabletop, you won't be upset during a live fire drill. So that's the tabletop. We use D20s. I have a different colored one for different hazards. I usually take it pretty easy on people, but it's pretty Socratic. And these are not the heavy cyberstorms, but they're also not the boring ones you do for compliance. We challenge people. Then we'll take the map. There's different pressure zones, and we say, who are the people in your neighborhood? Which of those stakeholders in the town have the least downtime tolerance in a way that could hurt the life and liberty of your citizens? And it tends to be this yellow zone has a pressure zone of 6. This yellow one here has the hospital. It just so happens the yellow one also has a nursing home. Across town is a dialysis center. Different one, different pressure zone. You need 40 gallons per patient per visit. Dialysis patients don't have a lot of downtime tolerance between treatment. Get very sick. There's other ones like a chemical plant. There's other ones like a manufacturing. So there were several stakeholders in the town, but we said, let's do ruthless prioritization. So we picked this one. A lot of the town's gravity fed, so water hammers aren't as serious when the water's flowing downhill. That particular one is on a pump station. So a water hammer is a very legitimate thing. So we say, who's the highest consequence? Hospital. If you went evil, what could you do? And the team, by the way, pastries are important. I brought pastries. And then the burger shop up the street to keep them engaged over lunch. So like feed them, feed their soul, feed their mind, feed their body, especially things that you did some recon on that they like. So they're playing the game. They're answering the questions. I'm not the expert. They're the expert. I'm asking them questions. And they said, these are our most important customers. This is our downtime tolerance. This is what I would do if I went evil. And we come up with some hazards. And we say, okay, now that we know the hazards for the highest consequence people with the least downtime tolerance, what could we do about it? Let's not do cyber. Do you have any engineering things you know how to do? Oh, yeah, there's a pressure surge arrestor. Oh, there's a time delay relay. So even if they don't know Idaho National Lab Cyber Informed Engineering, haven't taken the great training from Professor Kitty or from INL or from Ginger, we then walk them through. They're like, I know how to fix this problem. You know, it sometimes happens naturally. We could do one here. And we start looking at what's the most cost effective, the easiest to implement, it doesn't introduce the most operational risk. And we came up with 5 in this particular town. And it's not 5 that I'm pushing on them. They're like, I know how to do this. I want to do this. I don't even need your money. I can do this. So we have the willingness to spend about $10,000 per town. And so far, people are saying, I have enough budget to handle this. I'll do it. So far. So I could talk for hours about this particular one. I love this team. They tell me things. They bring things to me. They make me smarter. But what I'd like to do is if this gives you a general idea, then we'll pay for the implementation, we'll document the implementation, we'll say what we believe before, during, and after, what worked, what didn't, surprises, and then these become blueprints that be replicated elsewhere so that no matter what your town looks like, somebody has done something that they can steal from. Can I call up somebody who's been pitching this to their, not their town, but the water system that feeds their town? Go ahead. This is your 3-minute public service pitch that you did once in person.
Yeah, to the city.
Yeah, okay. That might not be on. Here, just use mine.
Okay. My name is Chris French. I'm a resident of this community, a computer security professional, and a father of 2. These are not the views or opinions of my employer. I'm here today to address the council as a volunteer of the Undisruptable 27 project of the Institute for Security and Technology. We're a group of policymakers, tech experts, and industry leaders working to secure America. So let's start with 2 questions, and not rhetorical ones. Do you know that hospitals can only run for about 2 hours without water? Are you ready for a 14-day water outage? Keep those 2 in mind. Over the past 3 years, there's been a steady campaign of attacks against critical infrastructure by nation-state threat actors and China in particular. Here's what we know. China's been pre-positioning to disrupt critical communications and utility infrastructure. In 2023, William Burns, former CIA director in China, said China plans to be able to take Taiwan by 2027. In 24, FBI Director Wray said China's hackers are preparing to wreak havoc and cause real-world harm to American citizens and communities, specifically tying this to water and power, and that they would attack civilian infrastructure to induce panic and break America's will to resist. And in 24, CISA tied these threats to military conflict with the U.S. 2 hours, 14 days. Threat intelligence tells us that we can most likely expect an attack on Taiwan in 2028 in September or March due to maritime conditions, though recent information as of Friday, relevant now too, suggests more immediate action. This situation is fluid. There have already been attacks on numerous U.S. cities, several within our own region. China has prepared. Waterbury, Connecticut, we've seen an outage. A regular outage crippled 2 hospitals and impact 100,000 people for 5 days. That was just an accident. But we expect an attack across many cities simultaneously, such as to prevent mutual aid, water, power, communications, all down, all at once, all over the country. We know FEMA wouldn't be able to mount an effective response. 2 hours, 14 days. So which 3 hospitals will be kept open? What will be sacrificed? I understand that exceptional claims require exceptional evidence. 432 words are simply not enough for this topic, but I urge you to include a 14-day water outage in your emergency planning and help me bring the nuanced discussion of this topic to local leaders and decision makers. There is time to act if we use it wisely. You can learn more at u27.org. Thank you for your time and your help. And special thanks to the council president and the city clerk.
This is what one of your teammates has done for his town. So far, these are not one and done. It takes a pressure campaign, a lot of meeting with people, getting feedback, thinking you have an hour, ending up having 3 minutes. but I see commitment, tenacity, creativity, and the willingness to experiment and more importantly, give feedback. So one of the things we've asked Chris to do is in the Slack, we sometimes schedule lunch and learns or monthly updates. We have a newsletter. So we'll have a meet and greet and discussion on what did and didn't work with a lot more detail than you just heard. Thank you for today.
Yeah, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff too. So.
Yeah. All right. So there is never enough time. I've cut into some of our time for Q&A, but I'm not going anywhere today. And like I said, I'm feeding people. We can talk privately, whatnot. A couple things for your homework. And please go line up if you want to ask some questions, but try to make them the ones that are best for camera. And we can do lots of them all week. But some of the next phase are going to be, is there a citizen checklist for how to have reasonable, not prepper, but prepared considerations for your families, water continuity, and the like. So recently, Huffington Post did an article with some camping people, some of us. It's not definitive, but like this is more focused on what you can do in your home. Carrie and others have been talking about, can we make draft templates, not just supplant or replace public safety ones, but we might even write them like a Mad Lib so that the town can be the hero, the state can be the hero, the governor can be the hero, but can we write some templates that could be inputs for these local municipalities for considerations and rejection or customization. So we would like to start a more earnest working group on those drafts. And there can be more than one type of lure for one type of fish, but let's think about what you can do for your household and how we might share that as a resource. Number two, we also need a project lead or whatnot to come up with the 3 to 5 questions you can ask at your town hall. Socratic, non-accusatory, non-sensational, but one way to start this with your local leadership community at a next open meeting, especially if they're asking about Iranian attacks last week. So I kind of wish we had this already. Number 3, we're going to start writing some boilerplate language so you can write to your congressperson or your senator, especially give you some intelligence on which committees of jurisdiction they're on that may or may not matter. And yesterday, we had to kick people out of the room because we were talking to a Senate staff that's about to introduce a bill for water. I'm not saying it's a great bill or a bad bill, but there's a bill being introduced for water. So having our thoughts ready en masse can sometimes help. Getting a call from 2 or 3 constituents on the same topic is enough to get their attention. Number 4, I desperately need more nominations for a hospital town that wants direct assistance on our 5x5. And moreover, I'm going to throw some money at some of you that are qualified to do this to help shadow and then repeat some of these 5x5s when you're capable of doing so. So I'm looking both for volunteer help and even 1099 help to make sure we get more of these pilots done because the clock has been accelerated by Iran. Maybe it'll be easier to get some of these pilots done. We already advertised yesterday, glasshouses.ai is a response to Glasswing, not looking at OTICS or the target-rich cyber poor. So we have 5 different work streams there for a 100-day sprint, not to solve the problems, but to catalyze corrective action. And I'll start some in-person stuff by feeding whoever wants to be fed today and tomorrow. So grab me in the hallway if you want to help on one of those 5 that we outlined yesterday through David Botts. The easiest thing to do is go to u27.org, ask to sign up for the Slack, ask to sign up for the newsletter, and start getting into the wealth of information we have. But it's going to be go time, so we're going to need a lot more activity in parallel. You saw Meshtastic and Slim yesterday from Caleb and from Slava. Comms are going to go out, or they'll have austere conditions. So part of this is making sure at least those 5 stakeholders know each other and have a way to talk to each other under adverse conditions, whether it's from China, Iran, or any other accident adversary. And if you think there's no business case for this, we won't get into it today, but please go read the Andy Greenberg article that came out just after 4th of July on a national exercise I did for all 25 insurers where these things are not handled well concurrently. It's pretty ugly. There's 2nd and 3rd order effects. They were very humbled by this. There's lots of exclusions. Your cyber insurance has exclusions for acts of war. Your infrastructure continuity insurance has exclusions for water utility outages. So your board and your senior leadership who thought they had a risk mitigation probably don't anymore. So this might be the right lure for that fish. But no matter what your skill is, we want to hear about it because this is the group that can bring to bear the insights, the blind spots, including the medical stuff that we brought up. I don't actually think anyone's going to get paramedic licenses. I was just asking, are there marginal ways we can look at first aid or whatnot to make sure our families might have more better than zero access. So if our thinking is wrong on that, bring correct thinking. We have the heart to do the right thing. We don't always have the facts to do the right thing. So bring us better facts. Let's do a yes and. And to that effect, let's just see what questions we can field right now. But the key theme is, I hope you're motivated. I hope you can see that this isn't just something edgy or theoretical. We're starting to see harm. We might see more, and we're not powerless to do something about it. I'm incredibly grateful for the people in the room that have helped. I'm incredibly excited to work with the people who have yet to help. But you are tenacious problem solvers. Let's get after it. Thank you. We're technically at time, but go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a word of caution, not a question. So when you do reach out to your communities, I know Josh said he wants the county emergency manager. Find out who the actual legal emergency manager is for your community, because if they have a city one and you go to the county, you just lost any credence. And it's really important. And I can help you find those people. If you can't figure it out, I want to help with this.
Yep. Hey, look, Bo and I said if we ever wrote like a biography on the Cavalry, we said we have no idea what the hell we're doing, but it seems to be working. Never in my wildest dreams did I think we'd be like crafting the concept of operations for public safety, national security things, but this room has been doing it. Congress has been listening. White House is listening. Our allied Five Eyes are listening. Please be part of that conversation. Thank you.